She was auctioned with tears in her eyes, until a cowboy said, "Now you'll only know joy." The dust hung thick in the late afternoon air, turning the sunlight into a dull, bruised gold as the auction yard filled with the low murmur of men whose voices carried no mercy, only money. And at the center of it all stood her, barefoot on warped wooden planks, fingers clenched tight around the frayed hem of a dress that had once been blue, but was now washed pale by too many tears and too many days without hope. Her eyes red and shining not because she wanted to cry any more, but because she had no tears left to stop, and every breath she took felt like a surrender she never agreed to make, because she had been promised once, by her mother, by her sister, by life itself, that pain would not always win. Yet here she was, being measured not by her heart or her strength or the nights she had survived hungry and afraid, but by the way she stood, the way her shoulders sloped forward, as if apologizing for existing, the way her silence made men assume she was already broken. The auctioneer's voice cracked through the air like a whip, calling out numbers as if he were selling cattle instead of a human soul, and each bid felt like another door closing, another future vanishing before it ever had the chance to be born. And she stared at the crowd not to plead. She had learned pleading only made things worse. But to memorize this moment, because part of her believed this was the last time she would ever belong to herself, the last time her thoughts would be her own. And when the auctioneer lifted her chin with 2 fingers to show her face, humiliation burned hotter than the sun overhead, yet she did not flinch, because flinching had never saved her before. She remembered how she ended up here, how the world had begun to unravel the night her father died under a debt he could not outrun, how her sister had held her hand in the dark and whispered that they would protect each other no matter what, how promises felt strong until hunger arrived and men with ledgers decided that survival had a price. And as the bids climbed higher, her mind drifted to a place far from the shouting and the money, to the sound of wind in tall grass, to a childhood dream where she once believed joy was not something you begged for but something that simply came. And the cruel irony was that she had never stopped believing entirely, even now, even as the gavel hovered ready to end what little freedom she had left. Then from the edge of the crowd came a voice that did not shout, did not bargain, did not carry the sharpness of men who wanted to own something, but instead rolled low and steady, like thunder that promised rain instead of destruction. And when that voice spoke a number higher than the rest, the entire yard stilled for a moment, not because the bid was shocking, but because of how it was spoken with certainty, as if the outcome had already been decided long before the words left his mouth. And she turned her head slowly, almost afraid that if she moved too fast the sound would vanish. And that was when she saw him, standing apart from the others, hat pulled low not to hide, but to shield his eyes from the sun, shoulders broad from work not vanity, hands rough and scarred in a way that spoke offenses built and storms endured rather than fists thrown in anger. And he did not stare at her the way the others did not weigh her like property, did not smile or smirk or calculate, but met her gaze as if he were seeing a person standing there, not an object, not a purchase. And something inside her chest cracked open painfully, because being seen after being invisible for so long hurt almost as much as it healed. The auctioneer wasted no time, slamming the gavel down as if eager to be done with the business, declaring the sale final, and just like that, the murmurs turned away from her, interest fading the moment the transaction was complete. Yet she remained frozen because fear does not end when the noise stops, it only changes shape, and she waited for the inevitable. Orders barked, hands grabbing, a future she did not choose. But instead, the cowboy stepped forward slowly, as if aware that sudden movements might frighten her, and stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could smell leather and dust and the faint trace of soap, close enough to notice that his eyes, when he finally lifted his hat, were not cold or greedy, but tired in the way good men get tired when they have seen too much wrong and refuse to become part of it. He spoke her name, not loudly, not roughly, but carefully, as though her name itself deserved respect. And she flinched despite herself, because it had been so long since anyone had said it without taking something from her. And when he saw her reaction, his jaw tightened, not in anger but in understanding, and he said, quietly enough that only she could hear, "You don't owe me fear." And the simplicity of that sentence nearly brought her to her knees, because fear had been the only currency she had known for years, and without it she did not know how to stand. He extended his hand, not to pull her but to offer, palm open, fingers relaxed. And when she did not move, he did not rush her, did not insist, simply waited. And in that waiting she felt something unfamiliar pressing against her ribs. Choice. And though her hands trembled as she placed her fingers into his, the touch was firm without being possessive, steady without being controlling. And as he guided her off the platform, past the staring eyes and whispered assumptions, she realized something profound and terrifying at once. For the first time in a very long time, no one was pushing her forward, and the freedom of that nearly overwhelmed her. They walked together through the yard, his stride naturally slowing to match hers. And when they reached his horse and wagon, she hesitated again because hope was a dangerous thing. And every instinct screamed that kindness always came with a hidden cost. But he turned to her fully then, lowering himself slightly so that his eyes were level with hers, and said words that would echo in her memory long after this day ended. Words that did not sound rehearsed or heroic but true. "What happened to you was wrong," he said, voice rough with honesty, "and it ends today." And when she searched his face for the lie she had been trained to expect, she found none. Only resolve, and then he said the words that broke her composure completely, the words that would one day give this chapter its name. "From this moment on," he told her, "you'll only know joy, maybe not all at once, maybe not easy, but real and earned and yours." And the tears she had been holding back finally spilled, not because she was weak, but because someone had finally spoken to the part of her that had survived when everything else was stripped away. As the wagon rolled out of the auction yard, leaving behind the dust and the voices and the life she never chose, she looked back only once, not in longing but in farewell, and then forward into a future she did not yet understand but was willing, finally, to believe in. And if you're listening to this story right now, if you've made it this far, understand this. Hope often arrives when we least expect it, wearing the face of someone who chooses kindness in a cruel world. So if you believe in stories where pain does not get the final word, where broken beginnings lead to powerful transformations, then stay with us. Because this journey is only beginning, and subscribing to this channel means choosing stories that remind you, again and again, that joy is not something you are born into, it is something you survive long enough to claim.